Good evening, good night, everyone. We are here. We're back. The verdict is in the Laurie Shaver case. As you can see, I was not prepared for this. But since the court kept the jury till 8:30 at night, they decided that they were going to get this thing over with before the weekend gets here. And that's probably why the court kept the jury so long. They didn't want the court likely didn't want the jury to have to go home, have the weekend to think and talk to other people and look at things. And so to avoid all of that, the court had the jury stick around, and now we have a verdict. So we took a poll earlier. I think there was 44% of us said we'd have a verdict before Monday, before the close of business on Monday. And we are definitely before the close of business on Monday. So all of those people who said that was when the verdict was going to come out, kudos to you. You win. You got it right. I haven't watched the verdict. I don't know what it is. I'm going to try to wait for a couple more people to get here before we throw the court up on the screen. But as you get into the chat, if you all could just let me know, based on the fact that we have a verdict now at 8:30 p.m. on the day they began deliberating, what do you think the verdict is? Do you think that she was found guilty? And if so, of what? Was she found guilty of second-degree murder? Was she found guilty of manslaughter? Was she found guilty of accessory after the fact? Or was she found not guilty of anything? Let me know. Let me know what you think. Drop it in the chat. And as soon as we get a couple more people here, we're going to throw this up on the screen, throw this decision up on the screen. They did have a question for the jury. So I did watch a question for the jury that kind of prompted me to get started in here. As you can see, I'm not in my full live attire, my normal attire, but the jury just prior to reaching a verdict, or just prior to coming back and saying they had a verdict, they had a question for the court. And the question was, do we have to fill out both forms? Now, the jury has two forms. So this may indicate how you should answer the question, what do you think the verdict is? But the jury has two forms. The first form is based on the murder, and I believe the lesser included offenses, manslaughter. And then the second page is just the accessory after the fact. I believe that's the way that those two forms play out. And they did have that question, do we have to fill out both forms? The judge answered, yes, you do have to fill out both forms. So at that point, we knew there was a verdict. So I tried to rush into the office and get everything set up so that we could, as you can see, I don't even have the lights going. I haven't put on a shirt and tie, all of that. But that was the indication that there was a verdict, and now we do have a verdict. So, but I stopped watching at that point. So I'm going to find out right along with you all. Trent, good to see you here. Glad you could join us. Natalie, great to see you as always. Now that we've got a couple people here, we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. The verdict, I'm excited. I want to see what happened here, because there was some debate as to whether there was a reasonable doubt left, and I'm on the no doubt in my mind side. No doubt, ain't no doubt about it. My vote is my vote before the jury question was she's going to be found guilty of murder. My vote after hearing that jury question is she's going to be found guilty of murder. So without further ado, let's see what the decision is. Y'all ready?
be seated. I see that all 6 members of the jury have returned. And who is the foreperson?
Me, Your Honor.
Please stand and state your full legal name.
Mercy Hosanna Langley?
Okay. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
Is it unanimous?
Yes.
Please hand the verdict forms to Madam Bailiff.
We have a unanimous verdict. Not a hung jury.
All right, after having reviewed both verdict forms, the court finds that there are no errors or omissions in the filling out of the verdict forms. Madam Clerk, please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 5th Judicial Circuit of the State of Florida in and for Lake County, the State of Florida versus Laurie Shaver, case number 2020 CF 2361. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of second-degree murder. Was the defendant in actual possession of a firearm? Yes. Did the defendant discharge a firearm? Yes. Did the discharge cause great bodily harm? Yes. So say we all, dated this 13th day of September 2024, Mercy Langley, foreperson. Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the charge. The defendant is not guilty. So say we all, dated this 13th day of September 2024, Mercy Langley, foreperson.
Does counsel for either the state or the defendant wish to have the jury polled?
Defense does, Judge.
All right, Madam Clerk, please poll each juror.
Angela Echevarria, is this your true verdict? Yes. Michael Peshama, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Mercy Langley, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Michael Smithson, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Keith Berger, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Tara Smith, is this your true verdict? Yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your time and consideration of this case. I also wish to advise you of some very special privileges enjoyed by jurors. No juror can ever be required to talk about the discussions that occurred in the jury room, except by court order. For many centuries, our society has relied upon juries for consideration of difficult cases. We have recognized for hundreds of years that a jury's deliberations, discussions, and votes should remain their private affair as long as they wish it. Therefore, the law gives you a unique privilege not to speak about the jury's work. Although you are at liberty to speak with anyone about your deliberations, you are also at liberty to refuse to speak to anyone. A request to discuss either your verdict or your deliberations may come from those who are simply curious, from those who might seek to find fault with you, from the media, from your attorneys, or elsewhere. From the attorneys or elsewhere, it will be up to you to decide whether to preserve your privacy as a juror. Thank you so much for your time and attention and patience this week. Our system of justice would not work without good people such as yourselves. You are excused from further jury service. Thank you and have a nice night.
The bailiffs are moving in. They are taking her away.
All right, Mr. Wiggs, please present your client for sentencing.
Yes, sir. Judge, at this time we move, obviously, for or attendance motion for supersedious bond. Renew our motion for judgment of acquittal, notwithstanding the verdict. All previous grounds stated and asserted.
The motion for supersedious bond is denied, and the motion for judgment of acquittal is respectfully denied. Okay.
Yes.
Is your client, is Ms. Shaver entitled to a PSI?
If she,
Okay. All right, Ms. Shaver, please stand. Based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of the offense of murder in the second degree with a firearm, as charged in the information filed against you in criminal case number 20 CF 2361. This court does hereby adjudicate you guilty of that offense and remand you to the custody of the sheriff pending receipt by the court of a pre-sentence investigation report by the Florida Parole and Probation Commission. You will be remanded now to the Lake County Jail. Let's set a sentencing date, Madam Clerk. What's 60 days out?
Let me get with Margie real fast,
Okay.
so she can,
I don't know if I think she left.
she left.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
What's the,
I'll listen.
oh, prints and DNA will be ordered. Is there a November date?
We can do, November sentencing date is November 25th.
All right, November 25th, at what time? 9?
Private attorney, yes, sir.
9 o'clock. November 25th at 9 a.m. will be sentencing, tentatively, pending the receipt of the PSI. Is there anything further from the defense?
Yes, sir.
Anything further from the state?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
So they took what was it, about somewhere between 3 and 4 hours, I think, to render a verdict in this case. And after one question, well, kind of two questions, they first asked to, review that tape, that phone call that she had where she found out about the fact, allegedly found out that there was a body in her backyard. They asked to hear that tape again. And then they had one other question, and that was, do we have to fill out both of these two forms? And after that, we have a verdict. And she's found guilty of second-degree murder. And this was a tough one. This was a tough one because the prosecution, again, didn't have any direct evidence that she actually committed this crime. This was an entirely circumstantial evidence case. And I maintain wholeheartedly that the defense crucified their client. Without the testimony of those defense witnesses, I think there's reasonable doubt. And I think the jury might have had a tougher time. And this was a rough one. I really didn't know on this one how the jury was going to come out, and I felt that they might be hung in this one, much more than I've in Tellus. I really thought that they were going to come back with a guilty verdict. In this one, I thought there's a chance they might not find her guilty here. So. For those of you who do think she's guilty, and this is a correct verdict, let me say this: the prosecution. I don't think these were the two greatest prosecutors in the world, but the prosecution and the Lake County Sheriff's Office, they both the sheriff's office did an impeccable job of pulling together every scrap of evidence they could possibly find to get them to the point that they could get a conviction against this woman who killed her husband. And that was no easy task. I mean, they didn't find the body for 3 years. The physical evidence had been destroyed. And they were able to piece together so much from so many other places that they were still able to get that conviction. So kudos to the Lake County Sheriff Department. I mean, the Lake County Sheriff's Office. They did an impeccable job. And my hat goes off to the prosecutor's office as well, because with that evidence, They weave that evidence into what is apparently a compelling enough case for this jury to have found her guilty. And again, just like it was no easy task for the Lake County Sheriff's Office to come up with all that evidence, it was no easy task for the prosecutors to weave all of that into that compelling story, into that story that had most of us feeling like she murdered her husband, and certainly convinced the jury that she murdered her husband. This is going to go up on appeal. I don't see how it doesn't. It may go up on appeal by her current attorney. She may get another attorney, but it is going to go up on appeal. And we looked at one of the cases, one of the appellate cases, the appellate case that stands for the proposition that you can convict on all purely circumstantial evidence. We looked at that case. That's Bush v. State. I didn't go through all the facts of that case, but in that case, even though the court said, the Supreme Court said, look, this is an entirely circumstantial evidence case, there was still a little more evidence than there was here, as far as they had the murder weapon, things like that, right? So, and they knew it was the murder weapon. We don't have that here. We have what we think is the murder weapon, but there's no direct evidence that it is the murder weapon, right? So in this case, when it goes up on appeal, they're going to be looking at it under the standard that they used, that came down in Bush v. State. But as to whether or not they're going to say, but in this case, the circumstantial evidence just wasn't enough, is an open question. I don't think they're going to say that, because the appellate court doesn't want to be in a position where they are reweighing all of the evidence and kind of setting, lines, guideposts saying, well, this much circumstantial evidence is enough, but if you don't have this much, then it might not be enough. They don't want to start laying those guidelines, because it gets hairy when you start trying to make those bright line rules as to how much is enough, because it was apparently enough for this jury. And that's what we base our system of justice on, that a jury of your peers thought it was enough to convict you. A jury of your peers who could at any point in time be accused of a crime they didn't commit and don't want to be sent to prison, perhaps for the rest of their lives, for a crime they didn't commit. Those people are the ones who saw this and said, no, this is enough evidence for us to convict. And if I was the one who was in the defense, in the defendant's seat, then I too would feel like this was enough evidence, right? I would stake my liberty on there never being this much circumstantial evidence in any matter to be able to convict me of a crime that I didn't commit, right? Because that's kind of the bar they're setting here. So I don't think the appellate court is going to overturn. Now, with that said, I don't know what all of the evidentiary decisions that the court made in this case were. Perhaps he made some decisions regarding admissibility of evidence that, when taken together, could bring this case back. If that's the case, that's something totally different. But for the appellate court to reverse the jury's decision, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. So let's see what you all have to say about it. So Yeah, Daria says this will definitely be on Dateline. They love a story with a husband murdered and buried in the backyard. Yeah, I agree. And not only will it be on Dateline, but somebody's gonna go to her with a asking for the rights to make a book, asking to make to write a book about this. Somebody's gonna do that. Somebody's gonna cash in on this. I no doubt in my mind. Yep, Dakota, this was a tough one. I feel bad for her daughter. Yeah, she's got 4 kids now. So she has 2 by Michael, and she's got 2 by her husband. I forgot his first name, but Filmer. And I feel bad for all 4 of them, but especially Isabel, because once again, if you believe that she murdered her husband, then that means she thoroughly brainwashed her daughter. She set out with the intent to brainwash her daughter. And that's a whole other level of abuse that I just don't understand. Tread says, she needs an experienced appellate attorney. Yeah, this guy's not an appellate attorney, which is why I said she may go with him. And I say she may go with him as far as the appeal is concerned. One, because he wants to vindicate himself, because he just got beat in a purely circumstantial evidence case. But also because there might not be an appellate attorney who will take this matter when she can't pay them, right? So he may do it either at a reduced cost or at no cost just to try to vindicate himself. So I doubt that he's an experienced appellate attorney. I didn't read his whole website and see what appellate experience he has. But at one point I filed my first appellate paperwork, right? So everybody has to have a first time doing something, right? So who knows? Yep. Natalie says, Dakota, yeah, I feel bad for Isabel and Laurie's other 3 children. So yeah, she's got 3 other children, and one of them is the son of the man that she killed, right? How is that going to mess him up? Knowing that his mother told him that his father was in jail, had gone to prison, and that's why his father wasn't around. And now he's realizing, no, my father wasn't around because mommy killed him. That's got to be rough. So Darius says, won't there be issue that she said Michael called her and stalked her? So I don't understand exactly what you're asking. So the fact that she said Michael called her and stalked her it just goes to demonstrate that she was trying to cover up for her own crime, right? She's trying to convince everybody that he's still alive, one, and she's also trying to convince the world what a bad guy he is. Because if you kill a person, don't you have to kind of convince yourself after the fact that you were kind of justified in doing it? I mean, unless you're just totally cold-hearted. After the fact, you've got to kind of paint that person in a bad light in your own head just to make yourself be okay with yourself. So, I'm sure that she has spent at least part of the last 9 years convincing herself of why this murder of her husband was justified. And we see that she did that in the behavior of her daughter. So yeah, maintaining this fiction that Michael's stalking her is just par for course with respect to her trying to get everyone to believe, as she has to believe, that her husband was just a bad guy and that he deserved to die. Because otherwise she has to view herself as a cold-blooded killer. So Sally said, just tuned in. What was it? Please. Hey, Sally, she unanimous. She's guilty. Second degree murder. Done. They will be sentencing her in November, on November 25th. She was taken away by the police. She is in jail or on her way there. Trent says the appellate judges are going to slap him around. Yeah, not only are the appellate judges going to, in their decision, they're probably going to be very calm. But if you all have never seen how appellate cases work, you have to write a lot. And the judges read an entire brief. These things are lengthy. They're very dense on the law. And the judges, they have the entire history of the case that they go through. They go through every piece of the case, and then they look at your arguments, or they may look at your arguments first, but you have to write a brief as to why all of this stuff that they're reading means your client got off, right? Or whatever you're trying to convince them of. They read all of that, and then they look at everything that happened in the case, and then you go to the courthouse, and it's not like this where you put on witnesses and there's live testimony. No, you're standing there and you start arguing. And then a few seconds into your argument, you get interrupted by one of the judges on the panel of judges that you're talking to, because they don't really want to hear what you have to say, because they already know what you're going to say because you put it in your brief. They want to ask questions about the things that you didn't put in your brief, and you've got to be ready for every one of those questions, and you don't know what questions are coming. And I don't think that this attorney has the wherewithal to be able to withstand that. I don't think he's going to be light enough on his feet to be able to answer the appellate court's questions as they're coming. So yeah, the appellate judges, I think, will slap him around, Tread. Allison says, we still never found out why the judge was questioning Laurie about how she felt about her attorney Wiggs. So we didn't. And the only thing I can guess is that because she was allowing her minor child to take the stand, and she was adamant that she was going to take the stand, he wanted to establish that he had done his job, right? That's my best guess, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't imagine that he advised her to allow her daughter to take the stand, and I can't imagine that he advised her to take the stand. Let's see. What else do we have? Will anything happen to Isabel for possibly not being truthful? So Maddie's mom, that's a good question. I doubt it. Here's why. It's highly likely that she has been being brainwashed since she was 6 years old. Because remember, the murder happened in November, and she was 6 years old in November. Well, I'm sorry. Perhaps she had just turned 7. I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly when her birthday was, but 6 or 7. And it's highly likely that for 5 to 9 years, she was being brainwashed. She was being brainwashed to believe that her father was essentially the devil. She was likely being fed memories, right? Memories were being crafted around things that had happened in her life. I think that she has been, a memory has been implanted in her brain of something happening at some point that was very traumatic, and around that memory was shaped this story. I think she really believes it. I think she believes she shot somebody. But regardless, I don't think that Lake County, I don't think the state, I don't think anybody wants to open up that can of worms just to get a perjury conviction. It'll be a tough conviction to get, and I don't think it's worth it. I really don't. So I don't think anything's going to happen. Does Jeremy Townsend have a case against her for defamation? So no, Natalie. So, well, let me not say that. He doesn't have a case against her for defamation for things that she said during this trial, because we have litigation privilege. So when you're in litigation, you kind of get to do what you want and say what you want and get away with it badge. But she was likely telling a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of stuff about Jeremy Townsend outside of this litigation. And with respect to that, he may have a defamation case. So the answer is kind of maybe, right? Allison says she's turning 16 this Sunday. You're right. She did say that. That would make her 7 in November of 2015. Correct? That math is right. That maths, right? 7 in November of 20. Yeah. Allison says Laurie will be in prison. There's no money there. Yeah, Daria, brainwashed. I agree. I think Isabel was brainwashed. I think Isabel was brainwashed. So again, if she was brainwashed, we can't really, we don't even want to try to convict her for perjury. The other thing is, we would have to, the perjury conviction would have the same standard as this, right? It has to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That means you have to believe, you would have to convince a jury that someone who is 7 years old either made up this entire thing or perhaps convinced. She can basically come in and say, look, I just got the date wrong. It really happened in November and the jury got it wrong in this case. And that may be believable to her jury, right? So that would be really tough to try to get her on perjury. She was 7. But yeah, I do agree. She was brainwashed, Daria. Oh, I'm sorry. Tread says Sunday, the Bears. No, Tread. No, we don't like Chicago Bears. We like the Detroit Lions. You know this. I just saw that you had a question up above that I missed. Oh, Tread says, what legal argument can be made for the appellate court to even take the case up? So for criminal matters, one, the appellate court has to take up every criminal case that is decided on purely circumstantial evidence. So nobody has to really convince them of any legal argument. They don't have to assert any legal argument. All they have to do is come in and say, this is an entirely circumstantial case, review it. And they have to. They have no choice. So there's that. 2, we've still got the those Facebook records. Remember, he's making a big deal about he does not want these Facebook records in. And there was that issue with the business records exception based on the certification that they gave. Now, what that certification essentially says, in a typical case, what that certification says is these are business records. They were kept in the normal course of business, and we certify that these are true and correct. And nobody just made these up just for this, right? But that's not exactly what Facebook did. Facebook records used to be self-authenticating. So when the Lake County Sheriff's Office got the Facebook records, they were self-authenticating, so they didn't get one of those certifications. Later on, Facebook records stopped being self-authenticating. So you remember when the defense attorney was making a big deal about Jeremy Townsend's Facebook records, and why didn't you go back and get those? And the prosecution said because it was too late. Because they had, I tread. I appreciate it. I appreciate it, brother. I greatly appreciate it, brother. As long as as long as you're not a cheesehead. I am not. I am not. It's all about the Lions. All about the Lions. But the reason that the Facebook records were old with respect to Jeremy Townsend is because the prosecution waited. The defense waited a while until Isabel came forward with her story about what happened, which was years later after they had already investigated Laurie. And they brought Jeremy Townsend forward as a new suspect. And by then, Facebook had already destroyed the records. Remember, he was very clear. Look, they don't have any Facebook records. And then the prosecution was very clear. That's because they were destroyed by the time we were investigating them because you took so long. So imagine then the rule changes after they get Laurie's records, and about the time that they begin trying to investigate Jeremy Townsend, they go back and ask for a certification regarding Laurie's records. Well, at that point, if Jeremy Townsend's records have been deleted by Facebook, so have Laurie's records, even though Facebook already gave the prosecution Laurie's records. They've now destroyed them all. So the certification essentially said, look, we know we gave you some documents. We have records that we gave you some documents. We don't have the documents anymore, but the documents we gave you were business records. They were maintained in the normal course of business. And even though we can't go back and look at them and tell you exactly what those documents were and that each one was a business records, essentially, we're Facebook. We don't give out anything that's not business records. We don't have to give out anything that's not business records, and we don't. You didn't ask for anything that wasn't a business record. That's essentially what Facebook said. But because of that little nuance where they were they didn't still have those records, that's another issue that can be raised on appeal. And the appellate court, I've never heard of that issue being decided, which means this may be an issue of first impression for the appellate court. And if the Facebook records are out, that's a whole lot of the state's evidence. So then we have to come back and do this all over again without the Facebook records. Imagine that case. That's a totally different case. If the appellate court decides, no, this isn't an improper certification. That's a whole new case. That's totally different. We probably wouldn't think that she was guilty without those Facebook records, right? Without knowing about those flowers and that poem. So, and then, he has a bunch of other things that he objected to that I don't think are going anywhere. I really think the big one is going to be those Facebook records. But he can raise an appeal regarding any of his objections and say that it was the court should have decided that differently. All right, I lost my place in the chat. Let me go back and all right, there's the Bears. Deal you Whoopoo. It's great to meet you too. I'm glad you found out we're here. And I'm glad you joined us. Allison says, I read 16 years, 9 months for second degree in Florida. So I actually looked that up yesterday and put that in the chat, what those were. And I think second degree, I believe you're right. That's the minimum, correct? It's 16 years, 9 months is the minimum, up to life. So at the sentencing, we'll find out that's a big range, right? 16 years and 9 months to life. So we have to wait for sentencing. And at sentencing, she's going to be allowed to have, witnesses come and say what a great person she is. And her deceased husband, there will also likely be some witnesses that are going to come and testify as to why she should get a life sentence, right? But we are going to have to wait until November to see what she gets in that range. But she will at least be in jail for 16 years and 9 months. Walger says, Allison, the PI, I think the judge asked those, are you satisfied with your attorney questions? Because that prevents her from claiming he didn't do his job and prevents successful appeal on that matter. Right. So not only is it going to prevent her from saying that she arguing an ineffective assistance of counsel as to everything that happened before that, but it also kind of helps the attorney because she can't sue him for malpractice for the things that he did up to that point either, because she's on the record as having said that. So yeah, I agree. Tread says, heck, a lot of people perjure themselves when testifying. Our jails will be full. Yeah, that's true. A lot of the people in jail would have another conviction added to their sentencing if they got convicted of perjury as well. If we started trying all of them for perjury. I think it's 30 years minimum with the use of a pew. You may be right. I'll look it up. And let you all know. I'll drop it in a comment tomorrow. I'll try to remember to do that. Making myself a note. Let's go. P says she was guilty the minute she put her daughter on the stand. Yes. So we were not. The people watching on this stream were not happy to see her daughter on the stand, and we saw it as child abuse. She's definitely guilty of something as soon as she let her child get up on the stand. But not only that, as to second degree murder, it's my contention that Isabel and Laurie's testimony solidified her conviction. Without Isabel and Laurie's testimony, I still have reasonable doubt. With Isabel and Laurie's testimony, there's obviously a cover-up going on. We're obviously making up a story because there's no way that this man disappeared off the face of the earth for 6 months while you were maintaining the fiction that he was God knows where. And now you're saying your daughter shot him in May. There's no way any of that makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense that he died in May, and you're the first person to tell us that he died in May, if none of that makes sense, then we have to ask the question, why are you feeding us this story? Why are you feeding us all of these lies? And the only logical conclusion is because you're the killer. So I really think that Laurie and Isabel gave Laurie the conviction. They just handed it to her. Allison says, you just can't successfully kill someone with cell phones and social media anymore. So Robert Tellis, he was convicted because of all of the social media and cell phone stuff. I mean, he took pictures of his shoes a couple weeks before the crime and then said, oh yeah, those were my shoes, but the shoes that the cops found under the couch that were all cut up, yeah, those shoes, they planted those there. Those weren't mine. So yeah, It's very difficult, and they actually said that in the Telus trial. Remember, Allison? They said, "Look, it's not easy to be a criminal anymore because we have all of this electronic data. You leave footprints everywhere. Remember, they combed the neighborhood looking for video surveillance, and they had so many pieces of video surveillance from all over Tellus's neighborhood. You just can't." They made it really hard to kill a guy. Yep, there you go. And surveillance cameras. We are thinking alike. Do you whoopoo? I ponder, if you get rid of someone in Fedland, what jurisdiction is going to prosecute? Okay. So there's only one place in the United States that you can't be prosecuted for killing someone in. That place is somewhere in Yellowstone National Park. There's a sliver of land that sits outside of the jurisdiction. Let's go P. I really appreciate it. You're welcome. I mean, I'm enjoying myself, and I'm glad to see that you all are happy to be here. So, and I do appreciate it. That's wonderful. I've never asked for anything. So you and Fred, I really appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you so much. And it is a pleasure to be here. And I'm glad that I'm able to answer some of these questions. I doubt I can answer all of your questions. There's a couple things that I had questions about. But I do greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let me get back to that other question. Let me find it and put it back up there. I can't find the question. And I've lost my train of thought. When I heard all that music playing in my ear, I lost my train of thought. Somebody remind me what that question was. Oh, right. Fedland. So there's a sliver of land in Yellowstone National Park, and there's no court that has jurisdiction on that piece of criminal land. So if you want to kill somebody, theoretically, if you can lure them into that sliver of land, kill them there, theoretically, you would be able to get away with it because no court has the jurisdiction to prosecute you. You're on federal land, so no state can prosecute you. And there's one court on this side that goes up to the edge of that sliver of land, and one court on this side that goes up to that sliver of land, and then this one little strip you're good in. I can't imagine that would ever happen. And if anybody tries to lure me anywhere in Yellowstone Park, I'm not going. And I suggest that you all don't either. Don't do it. Don't take the bait. They're trying to kill you. Stop. But everywhere else, there is, all of these rules are already set in stone. There is a court that will hear every case, if you're on federal land, there's a federal court that will hear the case, as long as you've committed a federal crime on that land. And every state has jurisdiction over every place in the state. And even on native land where neither federal law nor state law applies, Native Americans have their own courts, and you can be tried in their courts if you do something on their land. So everywhere you go, except that one sliver, there's going to be some place. So somebody did ask, it's higher. Daria asked, it's higher for her because there's a firearm. Again, I'm going to look that up and I'll put it in the comments after after this. And Daria says he was shot, right? Then buried. Oh yeah, there was a bullet inside of his skull when they pulled out the body. Daria, yes, people will be coming to talk about what kind of a great person she is. I imagine that Isabel will be one of them. Yes, and you said that her traumatized daughter will likely be there. Yikes! How much more trauma can she absorb? I don't know. I can't. I don't think I could have absorbed as much trauma as I'm sure she already has. And yes, Tread, use of gun is an enhancement in Florida, but it is a different level. It creates a different level of the crime. And I don't remember. So the murder charge that she had included the use of the weapon. Yes. So there is an enhancement. So again, I'll put the sentencing in the chat after this. Yes, Natalie agrees. Isabel will be at sentencing asking for her mother not to be sent away. Let's see. Daria says, thanks to Porch Pirates, we'll be catching killers with Ring cameras. Yes. Yes, I've got one. Just in case somebody gets killed in front of my house. They're going to get caught because of my Ring camera. Yes. Natalie says, I appreciate the testimony from the neighbor. There were lots of credible witnesses in this trial. Jeremy was credible too. Yeah, I found Jeremy pretty credible. I mean, I'm sure it was tough to get up there knowing your wife is going to be able to hear all of this and talk about the affair that you had, you know, after you all have done everything you can to put it to bed. And he got up there, he was calm. He didn't let the defense attorney get to him. He remained calm even with those. The defense attorney was using tactics that are not allowed. And it was evident in his cross-examination of Jeremy. So at one point, he asked Jeremy, he said something to the effect of, did you get a new tattoo in 2016? And Jeremy said, no. Then he asked another question. And then he came back to the initial question. He asked a couple more questions about, do you have a tattoo and what's the tattoo? And then he asked this another question. He says, so did you at some point see Laurie in the store and show her your new tattoo? So that's not allowed. We're not allowed to do that. We can't misstate prior testimony. And at that point, the prosecution could have objected and said, objection, Your Honor, misstates prior testimony. And that objection would have been sustained. They'd have read back the record. They'd have gone up to the bench, read back the record, and that objection would have been sustained. But in my view, the prosecution just let it play out because Jeremy was dealing with this defense attorney very well. Either he had a great coach or he was just telling the truth. It could have been both. But yeah, I found him very credible. Darius said it's on this mountain that's impossible to get to. No, the sliver of land isn't impossible to get to. It's just, how are you going to lure somebody there? It's kind of just an interesting fact that there is this one sliver of land where no courts have jurisdiction. But, Lamar, who are you trying to kill? You want to know the exact dimensions so you can plan this whole thing out? Lamar, let me write your name down because when somebody close to you dies, I'm telling them who did it. And I'm going to point to this video. As soon as somebody in Yellowstone dies. Maybe the prosecutor can, LJ Mad, thanks for joining us. Maybe the prosecutor can force Isabella to tell the truth by threatening prosecution. Perhaps. But again, I don't know that she was telling a lie. I don't think she was telling the truth, but I I don't necessarily think she was lying. I think she doesn't know what the truth is. I think the brainwashing was that impactful, that she just doesn't know what the truth is. Let's go P. What are you covering next? I honestly don't know. If you have a suggestion, let me know. I don't know what I'm covering next. Lamar, Jeremy looked like the type that would play Jesus in a low budget religious movie. So Lamar, me and my wife, after Jeremy took the stand that night, she says, Jeremy looked like Jesus. So apparently you're not the only one. You're not the only one. Let me say this though. I'm envious. He has some those locks. Hey, don't act like his hair ain't luxurious when you know it is. Let's go P says the defense seems sleazy. The defense had a very tough job in this case. Even though he had a tough job, though, I don't think he did a very good job. And I understand why you say he seems sleazy. He was doing a lot of things that I wouldn't do, and that I would feel ethically constrained not to do. Let me just say that. So I can understand why you're saying he seems sleazy. Wiggs did that double questioning today, asking about the paperwork. What paperwork? I don't recall that. Asking about the paperwork. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. I don't recall that particular thing. Daria says, FYI, that place is called Zone of Death. You talking about that sliver of land? It will be after Lamar gets done with it. It's gonna be the Zone of Death. Yeah, Natalie said, I really like Jeremy's hair. It was nice. Yeah, Allison. Remember, Tellus's jury was moved by his mother and ex-wife's impactful statement. So I was moved by his ex-wife's impactful statements and his mother. Yeah, they did a good job in that case, but I think I think with Tellus, we're dealing with a totally different type of crime. I mean, in this case, I can't imagine who would come in and be able to move the needle on this, given that everybody's looking at her as the person she described herself to be in that poem. So without saying it, just fill in the blanks. Everybody's looking at her as someone who has manipulated her daughter, someone who is essentially committing child abuse by letting her daughter testify and try to, take some blame for this. Everybody's looking at her as a murderer. Everybody's looking at her as just a disgusting individual who is to be able to bury your husband in your backyard and then put your initials and your new husband's initials on top of his grave. And recall, Michael Shaver dug his own grave. Laurie just put him in it. That's disgusting to me. I can't imagine that anybody would be able to come in and move the needle on this like they did in Tellus's case. That was an entirely different set of circumstances that, at least there was some room to move on. Zone of Death. That's wild. I learned something new today. Thank you. I actually got that. I learned about that on a YouTube video. Somebody did an entire YouTube video about this one little sliver of land. Daria says, okay, it's sleepy time for me now. And it is sleepy time for us over here at the Saunders household as well. It's nice to meet you too, Daria. Thank you for hitting the like button and thank you for your subscription. Somebody took Lamar's question. Shame on you. LJ Mad says, I think Jeremy was trying to look like a country Thor. So how about the Geico caveman? I think he could fill in. I think he's got a great job there, just waiting for him. Put a little paint on to accentuate those cheekbones, and he's in there. Yeah, Lamar. I mean, they were having cookouts and drinking parties out there. They had a wedding out there. I'm sorry. They had a commitment ceremony out there. They poured it for her daughter's birthday. That's when they had a birthday party on it. And daddy's buried underneath. Yeah. He thought he dug his own grave. All right, you all. So Daria just said it's bedtime. I tend to agree. I do appreciate all of you all coming out, joining us here. If you haven't hit the like button, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. I'm an attorney in South Florida, so this was a little, close to home for me. I, for one, will be watching my wife, because if she starts digging holes in the backyard, I know that my time is on this earth is short. And if I come on here and say there's a hole in the backyard, someone please call the police. But you guys are awesome. Allison, you're awesome as well. And we will be doing this again. If you all have a trial that you all want me to cover, I'd love to cover a trial. I will not be doing the YSL trial. I will not be jumping in to that. But if you all have a trial you want me to cover, let me know. I am an attorney, so I might be able to provide some legal insight as to what's going on in the trial. I don't know everything, but I do know some. I've been litigating here in South Florida and representing people here in South Florida for the past decade. So I know a little something. So if you have something you want me to talk about, drop it in the comments. Let me know, and I'll get on it. Again, thank you all so much for coming and taking this journey with me. For now, my name is Nathan Saunders, and this is The Legal Good. Good night, everybody.